Hi everyone, this video is a processing video from one of the images that I took while I was in Iceland last week. Now this is a complementary video to the one I posted on Sunday looking at the geothermal area. So this is just for you guys processing this image. I haven't looked at it yet. This is totally new, totally fresh. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, so I'm just going to dig straight in here and have a look. So the light was in and out a lot this time, and in this particular version I've done a 3-second exposure, which is making the fumaroles, the steam, just checking, yeah, 3 seconds, 32mm f16 at 31 ISO. So I think I had a 6-stopper on there just to try and slow things down a little bit. The light isn't fabulous, but there's great layers, there's great geometry. We've got this beautiful triangle coming in from the right hand side, and then this strong diagonal where all the steam is in the midground, and then the kind of streaky snow coming down off the pointy mountain in the back. It's cloudy, it's atmospheric, it's flat light. There was periods of sunlight coming through at some points, but in this particular exposure it's not that dynamic. But we can certainly add dynamics to this. Now, there's various ways of approaching this. We've got all these layers. So we've got a flat layer, triangle layer, diagonal layer, and then this pointy white layer, and then a kind of a flat overcast grey sky. I think it's important with shots like this to look at the overall temperature. Now, there are some beautiful blues in this rocky ash on the mountainside there. And I think it's important to allow these color shifts to be apparent. So I'm going to start off slightly cooler, but I'm going to add a gradient to the foreground where I'm going to add some clarity, and that's instantly going to bring that closer. As soon as we add clarity, and we've talked about this in the past, clarity, texture, luminosity, all of these things are going to make us want to look at that a lot more. So if I add some luminosity, as you can see, the combination of the clarity and the luminosity is creating something that's a bit more vibrant. And I'm also going to add some warmth. And that makes it feel like the sun's come out. This is much more working with the content to make it feel and look and kind of be joyful and interesting. So I'm kind of happy with that foreground. I can probably add even more clarity to that. Drop the blacks a bit. All of these things add contrast. Now I've got this band in the middle, which I think I'll adjust with a brush. And again, I want to really drag the eye through into this area. So I'm going to add luminosity just by adding my whites. And I think I might even up the exposure slightly as well. We really want to drag the eye through into that part of the frame really quite nicely, but we don't want it to compete too much with the foreground. It's important that we have each of these layers kind of represented and they kind of feel self-contained, yet complementary, if that makes any sense. Now the top layer, again, I think I can just joyfully, the brighter the top goes, the more we want to go there. If I make that top darker, you don't want to go into it at all. So the whole psychology of visual design is, where do you want to go? Where do you want the viewer to go? Where do you want people to explore? If we think about it, this beautiful triangle and these steamy areas are very important. So it's a case of how much of that top do we really want to get in there? But we can cool it a fraction, and by cooling it we can start to make it feel like a tonal band that's quite different from the other areas. You know me, I don't believe processing needs to be complicated or overly time consuming, but for you guys I'll maybe spend a bit more time on this than I would normally. We've got a tiny bit of clipping in this area here. That is really next to nothing, but I'll just deal with that with a local brush. Right, so I think I'm going to hit this with a vignette. but not a regular vignette. I think I'm going to vignette this with temperature. So I want to cool the outer side slightly, and I am going to darken it slightly, but I'll drop the saturation slightly. And that just allows it to be a little bit more focused. And then I'm going to use another vignette, but this time I'm going to get that whole center band, and with feather up high I'm going to just tiny touch the exposure and the saturation, and that way all of that beautiful color is concentrated in that middle section. You know my processing approach by now. Who I am right here sat looking at this photograph has the most impact on how this photograph is going to turn out. I can process this any number of different ways. That top corner now is feeling a little dark. Now I have a gradient that's covering that top section, so I just need to up the blacks. And that takes all of that ugly darkness out of it. It makes it just very ethereal, very airy. And I will add a little bit of texture up there because I want those snow streaks to be quite apparent. So I kind of want it, if you think about, if there's a story behind this photograph, this is a landscape being born in many ways. It's very young. And the stuff that's on the ground is tormented and tortured and burning and red hot and poisonous and sulfurous. And then as we elevate into the sky, it becomes a much more airy and ethereal area. And we can start thinking about heaven and earth, heaven and hell, all of those sorts of metaphors. Now, these metaphors are not explicit in the content. These are just in my head. And this is something that we can't communicate very well. So all we can do is talk about three-dimensionality. We can look at depth, we can look at textures, we can look at transitions, we can look at layers, we can look at color. We've got all of these different elements that we can play with. But at the bottom line is that all of the fantasy stuff that's in my head is just in my head. And I think that's important when you're making your own photographs, is to remember that an awful lot of the airy-fairy stuff that's just in your head, you cannot communicate. So just make sure it's there for you. And that way, anyone who's looking at your photographs can read into it what they want. They will make their own stories. But the idea is to make it right for you. Now, the more I look at this, the more I look at this foreground and think it needs even more contrast. And even more saturation. This is an incredible area. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. And you'll see in the main video that I made for the channel at the weekend, it was just stunning. So I just want to cool that bit down. I mean, that area of the hillside was really blue. And then I'm just going to dodge in some of these steam vents a little bit better. The only problem with doing a long exposure is they get a little diffused. I have other photos where I didn't use a long exposure. And obviously, you see more detail in those steam vents. But, I think that little brush made a nice difference there. So yeah, I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of happy with this. Doing a little bit of dodging still. So yeah, there's going to be an awful lot of this content coming up over the next few weeks. We went to about 5 or 6 different areas in Iceland. I was with Tom Heaton and Adam Gibbs and Thor Photography. We had an incredible time. They're great guys. It was an awful lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you an awful lot of this content from this incredible place. But for now, I think that photograph is looking pretty good. You'll notice that I haven't made a single local global adjustment, which is kind of funny. I will just drop that exposure down and lift the luminosity there. That just, gives me a little bit more contrast. And I'm just going to go into that sky one more time. And just lift all the shadows out of that sky. I don't want any darkness in that top section. So there we have one of the Central Highlands geothermal areas with a 3-second exposure, very ethereal. And yeah, I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for subscribing, everybody, and thank you very much for your continued support on a weekly and monthly basis. It's super appreciated. It's good to be back. As you can hear, my throat is still not right. I'm seeing a consultant on Tuesday, but yeah, we'll get there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.